Get started. So everyone, my name is Angel D'Angelo. I'm with Restorative Justice Coalition, pronouns he, him, and I have with me.
Hi y'all, my name is Sadie. I'm with Restorative Justice Coalition, pronouns she, her, hers.
And we also have Kieran.
Oh wait, let me put mine.
Hello, everybody. I was a little bit of a delay.
All right, everyone here, please feel free to state your name, pronouns, and organization you're with, and something you're feeling today. Whoever wants to start, feel free.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rake. I am a non-binary trans woman from Boston. My pronouns are they and or she. I have worked with the Restorative Justice Coalition. I have also been trained as a transformative justice practitioner with Unity Circles as part of their pilot cohort in Boston. And I also do independent direct reparations-based work in the New England region. So, and a word that I'm feeling about today is just tons of love. So lots of love. I love it.
Hi, 1 second. I think they're taking a little bit to turn back on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Hi, my name is Liliana. Coming from Miami via Puerto Rico, actually. Yeah, I don't really have like a lot of activism backgrounds except for taking the streets when we have to. But I'm an artist. A lot of my work has to do with being a Black colonial subject in Puerto Rico and having been so for like, I can only trace it back like 6 generations, unfortunately. But yeah, so I've just been wanting to incorporate more like activism and actual work with my art. I'm also kind of like bedridden at the moment because I'm recovering from some medical things. So I figured this would be a great time to like get that aspect started. And that's why I'm here. Thank you.
And Angel or Deja, if you feel comfortable, feel free to introduce yourselves. If not, we'll go forward.
Hey y'all, good to see you. And thanks for holding this forum. I'm Angel Jimenez. Pronouns are he, her, and not affiliated with any particular group, although I have worked with DSA and Restorative Justice Coalition in the past. And yeah, I'm happy to have the opportunity to be here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Radesha. I use she, her pronouns. I just really appreciate RJC for holding space for this conversation. Yeah, I don't see it being talked about anywhere else, so I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, I kind of miss Angel and Karen too. So hey y'all, what's up? Just want to talk.
Hey.
Hi.
Do pardon any technical issues we may have. So yes, Urdeja, it's so good to see and hear your voice. I think it's mutual. We really appreciate all the work you've been doing in the mutual aid work. So shout out to Urdeja for another successful mutual aid event last week. I think it was last week. I don't even know. Yeah, it was. So we appreciate all that because I think what we're realizing from the last year specifically, we have to do a lot better about organizing in the community if we actually want to see any transformative community change, which sounds like common sense, but it's something like I feel like a lot of organizers in the past fail to do. They don't mobilize or base build or bring this education out to the community, and then they wonder why community members don't know what restorative justice is, or they don't know what mutual aid means. Well, I didn't know what it meant either until I was confronted with it. So the topic of today is one size does not fit all. I think when we think about the criminal justice or criminal punishment system, rather, we see that it typically doesn't have any nuance. It says, you did this, you're that person, and this is the action we're going to take against you. And as the masses, the public, the court of public opinion, we've already decided oftentimes who is right or wrong before evidence has been presented in the court system. We've just determined guilt, and that's most often going to happen if the defendant is someone who's Black and or trans, oftentimes disabled. And even people don't want to believe this, but I've done the research. Fat phobia impacts how you're treated in the criminal punishment system. There's studies on how juries, it's mock juries were tested, and they were given criminal, like fake criminal profiles, and they were shown pictures of people and made determinations of guilt more frequently when the person was fat than when they were thin or more of
Attractive.
Acceptable. Yeah. And then you have things like pretty privilege, right, which can go hand in hand with white privilege. When we look at Greco middle school educator Deborah LaFave, who raped a male student in her care, a total abuse of power and dynamics, and she was considered to be too pretty for prison. So
that's
she was
literally what the judge said.
Literally on the Florida court rolls, we have too pretty for prison, and not a lot of people get that privilege. She was convicted, and she was given a very light sentence for sexual battery on a minor. You know, and these are complicated conversations because it's just like in our impulses, we just want to, we want to have one reaction to these types of things, and we see the criminal punishment system isn't really able to have nuance. So it wasn't able to say, oh, well, this was a male student, so they are a victim, you know, versus a non-male student who may have been thought of more as one if they were lucky enough to be humanized enough to be thought of as a victim. So we go through those moments. So these conversations are complicated because our system doesn't deliver justice. It doesn't deliver justice for victims, and it doesn't deliver accountability for harm causers. Then we're stuck with, so what do we do? What do we do about it? What are we going to do? That's why I think it's been so helpful. I know Angel and Erdasia are part of it, and Kieran and Emily with RJC have been leading this amazing book club we've been in. So I want to take some time before we go into the topic of today, just to do a little brief talk on the books. One sec. We started with We Do This Till We Get Free by Mariam Kaba.
We do this till we free us.
We Do This Till We Free Us by Mariam Kaba. And I have to say that book was completely transformative for a lot of the things that we have to deal with in our community. It touched on a lot of subjects that were really touchy, for lack of a better word. And it really made me think beyond the normal conversations about some of the more trickier situations. So I'm sure any of you that's done any type of criminal justice work has heard the phrases of nonviolent communication. I mean, not nonviolent communication, on releasing nonviolent offenders from the prison system, right? But that's an easy conversation.
Right.
Oh, well, they committed a drug offense, or they did a petty theft or something like that. That's not going to free us from this system, because a good portion of people in the system are people who were convicted of something that we would know as a violent offense. So that means we have to come together as a community to work on that. And then that other book, Beyond Survival, goes deeper into that. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on talking about the books, but we do have a book club you can join. But does anyone have a few comments or thoughts on either of those books if you happen to read them, or just restorative justice and abolition in general before we dive in?
I think when I was learning about transformative justice, we also learned from Mariam Kaba and the different ways that abolitionists can show up in their communities, and how abolition has always been based in and around like marginalized communities. So I think it's a really good investment to take a look at that book. I believe the current book we're talking about is Beyond Survival, right? So I have to catch up. But I also was able to be on a panel with Leah Pepicina Samarcina. Yeah. It was part of a conference around, I believe, sexual assault cases in Massachusetts. So it was just an honor to be able to just share space and the wisdom I got from them. Oh.
Yeah, what I was gonna say.
Trippy, man.
What I was gonna say about the Beyond Survival book is, yeah, there's a lot in there. It will take some time to get through because it does go so much more in depth into more the transformative justice aspect of things. And it does, what I appreciated most about the book is how much real to life experiences and situations that were covered, and to like just show how complicated and messy things can really be. And that, you know, one of the biggest takeaways in one of the actually a few of the chapters is kind of goes along with the theme for today, is it's not one size fits all. Some things are different for different people, different situation, and context is very important. And, you know, that's why things like this are called a practice, because, you know, you never really actually should 100% figure it out, because everything changes and you need to adapt accordingly. So yeah, the book is pretty good, pretty in depth. And that's why we're actually gonna have that as a second discussion. So if you're interested in joining the book club, and you missed this most recent book club to discuss the book, don't worry, we're actually gonna be discussing that same book our next meeting. So that's the plug for the book club.
Yeah, and if I can just add on that real quick. Miriam Kaba talks about all the time, like how there isn't just going to be one alternative to the prison system or to police. There's going to be millions of them, and in order to get there, we have to be doing millions of experiments. So I really appreciate how both the books that we've read give concrete things to be doing right now. As Karen just said, it's a practice. So yeah, there are things that we can do every day to build to larger experiments, and the most important thing is to get started right now and do what you can do. Yeah, that's really.
I like that. Let's do what we can do instead of being beat down by this giant system that feels like it's impossible to fight. We get organized, we can fight it. Before we get into the main topic today, how does everyone feel about doing a quick meditation? Thumbs up, heart. Wow, react. Thumbs up, okay.
All right, thank you, Angel. Okay, so what we can do, this will just be under 2 minutes here. If you'd like to turn your video off, feel free to turn your video off. And we're just going to do a real quick love exercise for ourselves and the world. So get into a comfortable position, whether it's seated or laying down or whatever feels good to you. And we're going to start with 3 deep breaths. And when I say deep breath, let's think about inhaling through our nose deeply and letting your stomach expand as you do it. And exhale, pushing everything out of your stomach, diaphragm, completely out, and hold for a moment. And then inhale again. I like to call these universe breaths because it pulls you deep in. And we'll do one more inhale. And as we exhale, use whatever noise you need to release that air from your body. And hold. And go ahead and breathe normally. Now, as we sit and visualize while we're in this space, you can close your eyes if you'd like. Think about a warm yellow light centering around your heart and your stomach. And I want you to envision from the trees and the air and the water and the ground, this golden light coming into your person, filling you with peace and lightness. And as this golden light comes into your body, we express gratitude in our mind for this amazing moment and the presence that we can be in. Take 2 more deep breaths. And really center yourself into that feeling of whatever it might be that comes in as the earth meets you in your energy. And as you exhale, I want you to think of the world and the globe, those that you love, individuals that might be suffering in this moment, individuals in need of a reminder of love. And I want you to almost form a circle of that light that's coming into you. I want you to send it out to whoever might be in need of love in this moment or healing. Let that golden light radiate from the earth and spread through your body and to anyone who might be in need. Let's send them thoughts of love and peace and groundedness. And take another deep inhale. And as you exhale, send an extra little oomph of all that magic to these individuals. And lastly, but certainly not least, we want to send love again into ourselves. This love that we've received from the earth, this love that we send to others, let's send it back into ourselves. Almost think of yourself as a part of this globe or this circle that's continually moving. That's love, that's energy. What I like to do is put my right hand over my heart or my chest area and my left hand over my stomach, and take a deep breath and exhale. And I want you to thank yourself for giving yourself this moment in gratitude and love. Just take a second to appreciate who you are and all your complexities and all the beauty. And even things that you might find faults, but they really are idiosyncrasies that make us who we are. All right, and with another deep inhale, I want you to come back into the present moment, into your body. Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. If your eyes were closed, go ahead and open your eyes. Thank you for this space.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Ashe.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Sadie.
Mm-hmm. I feel super relaxed now.
I do too. I was never good at meditating, honestly, until I learned from you all the right, well, not the right way. I don't want to say the right way,
But what
works for me.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to dive in here with some heavy subjects, although it looks like everybody who's here with us today has been around some of these subject matters, whether they've experienced them personally or not. Where's the, so used to Google Slides. So we're going to talk about something known as participatory defense, and then we're going to be tying this to a local case here in Tampa, Florida. But we feel it's important that we are educating everybody on what participatory defense is, why it's important, how it's been done, and kind of dispel any rumors and myths about it. At any point, if you feel like jumping in either to ask a question, or if you have a thought or opinion, a disagreement, something's uncomfortable, either jump in, you can mute and interrupt, or you can type stack in the chat if you're more introverted and would prefer to be acknowledged first. We can do that. I'll get started in just a sec here.
Get into frame a little more.
Yeah, please come into the frame. All right. So, and this is recorded for purposes of people who are not here, but also in case you want to cross-reference this again. Before we get started, I just want to say one thing about RJC and a lot of the people we work with is we really don't like to believe in experts in the sense that, oh, well, we know it and you don't, and that's it. Like, even with my relationship with Kit, interpersonal relationship, we're both trained through these different processes, but we learned from each other throughout the entire time we were working together. Sadie and I learned new things from each other. Kieran and I learned new things. So we intend to not just teach, but also learn in this space as well. So don't hesitate to correct us. Of course, this is a little about us. We were founded in 2017. I think most of you that found us here know that we do want to create a just national criminal justice system that impacts victims, society, and those who offend in a positive, healing, and restorative manner. I think by now we're looking less into systems and more into cultures. But this was a few years back when we started this, so we've grown a lot since then. Yeah. I always have to put this quote in here. Sadie threw this into a presentation from James Baldwin, and it is Pride Month, so the perfect time to elevate queer folks, especially Black queer folks. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed till it's faced. That gives me so much comfort because it's just like, okay, my life may end before we come to some of the solutions we want to see, but I faced as much of it that I could in this life. And hopefully that sets a precedence for people beyond me and my life. And I think about Andrew Joseph III, who isn't here with us anymore, who doesn't get to see all these wonderful transformations in his name because we're facing it now in his absence. So I think about that a lot of times. For example, I'm very passionate about ending solitary confinement. And I'm thinking about all the people who are in there right now in this moment that don't know we're facing this right now, but are probably glad we are. Love that picture. So I just want to ask anyone if you know, if you've heard the term, if you feel like throwing in the chat or unmuting, what does participatory defense mean? Any guesses?
I will say when I first took a look at the word participatory defense, I was like, does that mean that, well, I knew it had to do with criminal defense, but wasn't sure if it was something that the public could take part of or that I could personally do. Looks like we might have a response in the chat too, so.
Let's check that out.
Oh, that was an earlier comment.
Oh, it was earlier.
Yeah.
Still worth looking at.
Oh, thank you for that comment though, Angel. Yeah, Bell Hurts urges us to deconstruct the privileged voice of authority. It's good to know. So this is what participatory defense is, and this is from participatory-defense.org. We are not affiliated with them, but we have definitely learned from a participatory defense hub. We also accidentally did participatory defense, and we'll go into that later. But it's a community organizing model for people facing charges, their families, and communities to impact outcomes of cases and transform the landscape in the power of the court system. So essentially, just like Sadie said, it has to do with the criminal defense process, and it involves participation. But what's exciting to me is it involves participation of people who are known to the defendant themselves, and just community members like us that just care. So it's challenging because when I first heard of the term or first actually learned that it was a thing, and I remember even though we had already done it once, still thinking like, well, we can't do that. We're not attorneys, but we did and we can, and so can all of you. Now, I'm not gonna pretend it's easy. It's not easy. Participatory action research. I don't think I've heard that. I have an imagination in my head what that is, but.
Can you reiterate?
If I can, sorry, it's really similar to participatory defense. It's literally just like the people being involved in the research process, rather than like a sociologist studying people. The people are involved in the process.
Gotcha. So in many ways, I feel like when we reimagine society, everything needs to be as participatory as possible. And I think the impact of voices, one day we'll probably have a workshop on adultism and how children are never able to participate in decisions that impact them. So I think it's wide range. And I think that leads us to abolition, right? So does anyone have like, how do you define abolition? If you had to define it to someone who's never heard the term.
I think abolition is the complete deconstruction and eradication of oppressive systems, such as prisons, the police, psych wards, because we don't need those structures to be held in place, which are typically used historically to police and control and have marginalized people in those spaces, and shifting the tide towards giving the optics that white people are able to engage or be present more in society, while Black people who are merely demonized just for existing and being killed just for existing, that's where that power dynamic comes in. So abolition is saying completely eradicate it and then transform the conditions so we don't have to set ourselves up with oppressive systems.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning psych wards, because that's not often brought up in the conversation. I like Liliana there says, from the context of a colonial subject, to me, it's the eradication of the oppressive powers that be and the laws that enable them. I like that. Yeah, and I did not put a definition here in this presentation because I really feel like it's really something that we have to decide for ourselves as a community what we want it to mean. And I think Erdeja talks a lot about abolition from two different contexts of just taking down, like, I guess to back up, when I first heard the term, I was only taught that it's about tearing down prisons tomorrow and then we just go back to like work on Monday. And I was like, well, that sounds terrible. Like, that sounds like a terrible idea. But it's really, I've been learning over the years, it's really about, yes, we're dismantling those oppressive systems, but we're not just tearing them down and then replacing them with the next one, because that's happened a lot.
Yep.
The Roman Empire was the empire once, the Ottoman Empire was an empire once, now we're the empire of the United States. All of them have the commonalities of we have to have somebody oppressed. And it may have been different at different times who it was. We all have different relationships with oppression. But when I think of abolition, what excites me about it is the building. And Erdeja said earlier, that's really like gave me the chills. It's like we have to have a million alternatives to police and prisons. And that's what's missing. One size doesn't fit all, right? We need to have more options when we run into a situation. I was thinking I heard something yesterday and it turned out to not be. I do tend to suffer from paranoia, but I thought it was a domestic disturbance happening above me. And I started panicking because I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm not going to confront a man like me, small, effeminate gay man. I'm not going to do it. Like that'd be the end of my life. But it's just like, I'm not going to call 911. My next thought was, do I knock on neighbors' doors and try to get people to participate and come up? But have I built that kind of organizing with my neighbors?
Let's talk about that.
Sure haven't. So they would probably be like, oh, you want me to call 911 for you?
Yeah, that would be
Actually,
it.
no, that's not what I want you to do, but I guess that's what you're gonna do. So abolition to me is about options, and that makes it sound so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
This always happens to me. Oh. So is participatory defense abolition work? I argue yes. Mariam Kaba brings it up in the first book, and I think it may have come up in the second book.
I think so, yeah.
I haven't gotten as far as I should have. But I'm not going to read this whole thing, but the Participatory Defense Hub Network talks about time saved. And this is where you're basically saving somebody from the criminal punishment system. At the bottom here, as a hub, and this is, I think, in 2018, they published this, they're responsible for reducing 6,500 years of incarceration. That's a huge deal. When you think about the criminal punishment system, it seems undefeatable. But we've learned a lot of things over the years, right? We've learned that most people are not even convicted. They take plea bargains. They don't see that they have options. Participatory defense is an opportunity for us to challenge those systems. That does not mean that every participatory defense case ends in somebody getting their charges dropped. That does not always happen. Sometimes someone's facing 30 years and they end up with 7. That's not the best outcome. It's a better outcome. And it can depend on the situation. There are some people who go into participatory defense situations where they're like, oh yeah, I did the thing. And they are okay with, they have accepted that I may have to do something, because we haven't created those alternatives yet. But it's better than what the other options can be. Principles of participatory defense, family and community strength. It is so important. When we met with this formerly incarcerated participatory defense hub leader in Gainesville,
Jody Polk.
Miss Jody Polk, she was phenomenal. And the way she does her work is she makes sure that family members that wish to be involved have their voices heard, and that they are key and center in this process. So it goes back to the elimination of the expert or the authority, even though Miss Jody definitely has tons of skill and knowledge, I didn't feel like subordinate to her in the space, and I expected to.
It was like a partnership.
It was like a partnership. And when they let us observe, the family that she was helping gave us consent to observe their participatory defense conversation. And it was really exciting watching this person who's just I think the girlfriend of the defendant, just a regular everyday person, not an attorney. Like, oh, this happened, this is the outcome we're hoping for, and learning how to navigate that. Organizer and agent of change relationship. So participatory defense does not want it to look like, oh, well, Sadie's the service provider and I'm the client, because then that creates an inequity. That creates an authority. That creates, well, that's what basically what hierarchy. Thank you. I had a criminal defense attorney when I had a criminal charge, because of course, like I wasn't going to do participatory defense on myself. Like I really didn't know what was going to happen. And although my attorney happened to be really good, there was still a power dynamic. And one of the biggest power dynamics that he willed over me was he had all this knowledge and institutional knowledge that I didn't have. So whatever he said, I was just like, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. But was I making an informed decision? No. And nobody was sitting down with me and saying, these are your outcome prospects. This is what could happen. And that's the relationship I think most people have with their attorneys. It's a disconnected relationship. And I'm starting to see more people saying things about their therapists like that. And it's like, I had therapists before where I literally explicitly told the therapist, I want to work on my childhood trauma. And this therapist kept going back to my present day relationship. And I was like, I don't want to work on that. I want to work on the childhood trauma, because I know that that's causing problems in my present day relationship. They were just so, like, I wasn't participating in my own care. So I want us to start thinking about people in the criminal punishment system as being participants in their own care. By working individual cases, communities can work to build a movement that's going to hold the actors of these courts accountable. I can tell you there's a few judges out there that need to be watched a lot closer. And I'm grateful that sometimes they have eyes on them, because things happen, and when they have eyes on them, suddenly things change. Now, I don't believe we're not going to court watch our way out of the oppressive system. We're not going to participatory defense our way out of it. But we are going to make some relief, and we're going to have some calls to action that can challenge the current structure and maybe the power dynamic. Okay.
Can you name it?
Are there any attorney members in the coalition? No, there are not. None of us are attorneys.
At present.
At present. Future behold.
No, but I think that's what makes this work even more magical. We do have, friends that are attorneys that we do reference if we come across a really difficult case or something that we're working on. But I think it makes it all the more powerful that we don't need to be centered in that institution to be able to facilitate real changes in the criminal punishment system. I think there's one other thing I wanted to note before we moved on, that something I found interesting, and I know we just went over our principles, but whether it's connecting the family to the defendant, making sure that they have the emotional support they need, whether it's connecting them to services that might be able to support them in the institution, in court, every piece of each one of these things individually can be participatory defense. It's not necessarily all of these have to meet to make it that. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there too. There's participatory defense, of course, can be defense in the criminal court system, but also it's a community-based organizing that's able to support families as well. So even though the name has defense, but yeah, just wanted to throw that in there too.
I just got the chills. And I think too, like, if you're somebody that's ever faced a criminal charge, whether a misdemeanor or a felony, it's scary.
Yeah.
It's terrifying facing a judge, even if you have your attorney, especially if you have a public defender. I can't even imagine what it's like for them, because it is like literally being in a assembly line. Being in the court, facing a judge, it was so funny to me, because I couldn't understand anything that was happening. And I was diagnosed with, oh shoot, I wasn't supposed to do that. I was diagnosed with ADHD in my 20s, but I've had it since childhood. So I struggle with a lot of noise and a lot of distractions. There was so much happening in the courtroom. I don't even know what the judge said to me or what I just said I agree to, but my attorney told me to say it. That's justice. And then Sadie and I actually were at we were doing participatory defense for somebody, and we were at a Zoom court hearing, and I still don't know what happened on that Zoom court hearing.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea what happened. Like, everything was happening so fast. It was like I was at the deli at the grocery store and my number was up and I'm getting my cold cuts. Like,
that's a great way to put it, because it is. It's like a number and a symbol.
Yeah. Oh, notable participatory defense cases. I was wondering if anyone here could think off the top of their head, and I know I flashed one on the screen, so if you saw it, like, don't cheat, pretend you didn't see it. But it's okay. I think most people didn't see it. So can you think of a case that was where participatory defense strategies were used, even if that language wasn't used? Any notable case in the United States?
Well,
no, that's okay. We'll talk about some.
I would say too, like, we were talking about that community building. So even 2020 was a wild year. Not even 2020 was a wild year for us. So even cases that got national prominence and pulled and moved our movement forward, those would be excellent examples. Or if there's any individuals who were harmed or maybe lost their life as a result of direct police violence, cases like that would be included in what we would ID as a participatory defense case.
Absolutely. And participatory support after, a police or state sanctioned death is transformative for the people involved. So one case that comes to my mind immediately is Santoya Brown. I think a lot of people are familiar with that name, but if you're not, she was arrested in the state of Tennessee. She was forced into sex trafficking at a young age, below the age of 18. And I don't know all the details, and this may be triggering, so I apologize if you need to step away. It's okay to step away. But she was in this situation and defended herself, and that resulted in the death of the person that was causing the harm. And she was facing very lengthy, I think possibly life in prison for this. And that's work Miriam Kaba is so passionate about. Specifically, survivors who are defending themselves, facing criminal charges can happen on a micro or a macro level. And this typically happens to non-men as well as queer and trans people, most specifically Black women of color. I mean, Black women of color.
Black and women.
Black and women.
So
You got me.
I think of like the first prominent one in my mind as the Eric Garner case. Just because of the national prominence, it challenged ideas of what police, what's the word I'm looking for? Lethal force, the use of lethal force with police officers. And it really stimulated conversations. We saw the community rally around the family, and we saw the community start to think, well, hey, this is maybe how we should proceed forward. So things like that make me think of these prominent cases that we've seen over the past few years as really notable participatory defense cases, primarily because of the community involvement, conversation, and then advocacy that goes into it as a result.
Exactly. And I think it's important to recognize the fact that when Black people are killed by the police, most especially, they are made defendants, even though they're deceased and they can't, they're put on trial. We saw that with George
Every
Floyd.
single case.
We're seeing this all the time. So it is actual participatory defense work, that's unfortunate. And it's against a entity that itself creates and perpetuates the problem. And that can make it even more daunting. Andrew Joseph III is participatory defense work when you think about it, because this young boy deserved defense and protection. One of the most notable cases, and this case is special to me because it was my first time doing participatory defense, although I had no idea that's what it was. I was not the activist I am today. I didn't even know what restorative justice meant. It was the case here in Florida of Marissa Alexander. Good, yeah. So this is a case that should stay in our brain. The state of Florida versus Marissa Alexander. So as I'm saying this, some of you may remember that in 2012, Marissa Alexander, who is a Black woman, was living in her marital home with her then husband, whose name I still remember. It was Rico Gray. He was known to be very violent. And I think they had at least one child together, maybe two, and then they each had children from previous relationships. So the home was it was a very volatile place to be where there was violence, because not only was she there, but she was also worried about her children, as anybody would. She one day had enough. She was really concerned that this violent turn was going to take an even more violent turn. She took a gun and fired it in the air in order to get him to leave the house. And it was successful. He left, and then she, from what I understand, she then like locked the home. He called 911, running away. They immediately came and arrested her for aggravated battery. Florida has, and I believe maybe the birthplace of,
It is.
Stand your ground.
It is the birthplace to stand your ground.
well, not Stand Your Ground. So Stand Your Ground is going to come
Castle
up later.
Doctrine.
Not the Castle Doctrine, but mandatory minimum sentencing.
Oh,
Can we do a quick, just for everyone, just a quick review of Stand Your Ground and Castle Doctrine? Sorry, just so it's inclusive.
Sure. Stand Your Ground and Castle Doctrine, I think, are very similar, Kieran. Okay, so Castle Doctrine, my understanding is that's just the generalized rule about if someone comes onto your property, you can kill them, which is wild. Because I'd rather someone rob me blind than take their life. Okay. Then Stand Your Ground is an extension of that, where you don't have to be on your own property. It could be, oh, well, I'm at Publix. For those of you that are not in Florida, Publix is a giant grocery store here that you should boycott. I'm at Publix. Someone looked at me funny. I felt threatened, so I shot them. Now, that typically only works if you're white and male.
Yeah.
That's what Michael Draca you tried to use.
And it was like, I think we first really learned about that with the Trayvon Martin case.
With Trayvon Martin, yep.
We're in a public space. Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody felt threatened, shot, killed. It was legitimized.
Yes, and we'll actually talk about, because I do tie that in because it's important. So those two laws are known Florida originals. I think it was 2005 Stand Your Ground came about. We talked about that on that radio show when the Marquise McLaughlin tragedy happened. Florida has mandatory minimum sentencing. And one of the sentencing laws that we have is known as 1020 life. 1020 life means that if you use a gun in the commission of what's called a forcible felony, so let's say you rob a 7-Eleven and you have a gun on you, but you don't brandish the gun, it's just on you. That's 10 years. Let's say you rob a 7-Eleven and you point the gun at the clerk, but you don't shoot them. That's 20 years. Let's say you rob a 7-Eleven and the clerk's wanting to protect the money for their $7 an hour job for some reason, and you fire the gun to scare them, but you don't shoot them. That's life. So 1020 life. There's no nuance to that. There's no, what's the situation? And then you hear things like Stand Your Ground and you wonder like, okay, well, she was in her home. She was facing violence. Do you think the state of Florida granted Marissa Alexander Stand Your Ground immunity? Didn't. White man defends himself in an altercation he started and kills Black victim. That scenario, unfortunately, is not just the Trayvon Martin scenario. That is also Marquise McLaughlin's story.
Jordan Davis.
Jordan Davis. Yes. And in Jordan Davis' case, of course, is different in the sense that a conviction, a justice was given in that case, but it's ironic. And eventually. Yeah, that's right. So with Michael Draca, for those who don't know, in St. Petersburg, or was it Clearwater?
Clearwater.
Clearwater, but it wound up going under Gaultieri. So they were in a gas station. Marquise McLaughlin was at 28. His girlfriend Brittany was in the car with was their child there?
Yeah, so their child was in the car too, and he walked in with his son into the store. And Draco was upset that he had parked in a handicapped spot. Not sure if there were other ones, but while the car was still on, they got into altercation and he shot him inside the store, pretty much while he was holding his maybe 3 or 4-year-old son's hand.
Right. And what Marquise McLaughlin was doing was defending Brittany. So it's just like, why are you causing problems with my girlfriend? Like, just leave it alone. We can have a conversation about parking in accessible handicap spots when you don't need to. Sure, that's not something that needs to be handled by a vigilante.
Correct.
Michael Draca, who was his killer, had a pattern of harassing Black people in similar gas stations. Sheriff Bob Gaultieri did not charge Michael Draca with a crime initially because he said he wasn't eligible for arrest.
Stand your ground.
Stand your ground. So I say that to say that this is all the state of Florida. Marissa Alexander, no. Michael Draca, yes, let's give him stand your ground. Eventually, though, because of participatory action, state attorney, what's his name?
Warren?
McCabe,
McCabe,
Bernie,
Bernie McCabe,
who's now deceased.
who is now deceased, finally was pressured to put charges in. Groups like Restorative Justice Coalition, we wrote a petition that got like 50K signatures that was put on Color of Change's platform. Dream Defenders jumped in, BLM Tampa was there. Charges were eventually filed and he was convicted. Now, from my mindset, of course, we're like, okay, well, that's putting someone back into the prison system. And it's like, how is it? Well, you know, it's complicated when these situations come up, and it goes back to one size doesn't fit all. But one thing that I know is, as a community, the Black community did not feel safe in Pinellas County, knowing that this harasser was roaming free after having committed murder. So something needed to be done.
That's good. So I want to just open some space, because I'm sure a lot of folks have a lot of familiarity with these cases. So does anybody want to chime in or discuss their experiences with or reactions to some of the cases that we mentioned?
Leanna has a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm trying to assimilate a lot of this amazing info when it comes to just Puerto Rico's current situation, because at least back home we've had like I mean, long story short, it's like tied in after the passing of Hurricane Maria. It has been scientifically proven that marginalized communities' lives become, you know, like they're in danger after natural phenomena. It's just like goes hand in hand. So ever since Maria in Puerto Rico, we've had like a crazy wave, and it just continues to go every year of women and non-binary bodies just being erased. And we're getting to the point, we've had several governors coming in and out during that time. Some have been ousted, some have like quit, and they've all failed to do a proper state of emergency that people have been asking for a long time. So as of late, I feel like every time I catch up with a headline, it's a lot of mention of vigilante justice, like, oh, they let him out on bail, but like the people in the community did what they had to do. So like, at least what I'm trying to assimilate with all of this, like with one step in Florida and like 1 foot in Florida and 1 foot in Puerto Rico, is like, what is that happy medium of like being able to provide that like participatory defense to a lot of these people, but like also give the community chill so that they don't feel like they have to take it into their hands and also become like part of the problem, you know? So yeah, that's my question, if that's a question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I would like to open it up to anyone else that has kind of thoughts on that.
Like maybe it's the creation of a similar coalition like this in PR, but same, are they too far gone if they're already taking, you know, justice in their own hands? It's, if you've already made that decision that you feel like nonviolent confrontation doesn't work for you, like, you know, how do I bring you back to just like potentially protest instead of wanting to take someone else's life?
That's tough. I think it's definitely a good question. And I think that, for one, I do look at violence as a thing, like, it doesn't, for me, there's a difference between self-defense and violence. So I can understand, like, if somebody was let out, and I'm, as I say this, be mindful that I'm trying to look at it from a nuanced way. But I understand if someone was let out on bail, like a Michael Drake, a person, like if he had been let out on bail and the community took it in their own hands, I probably wouldn't blame them because he is a threat to life. But when we're taking matters into our own hands over things like, you know, somebody stole from me and now I want to chop their head off, that's not the way we would look at that kind of thing. And as far as starting one in Puerto Rico, please feel free. We would be happy to have an RJC there. Does anyone else kind of have any thoughts to that? No pressure if not, but go ahead.
Liliana, did you come off mute?
All right, so what we'll do is we'll move forward a little bit, but that's definitely stuff we have to think about, and we will continue to discuss. So now we're going to talk about George Zimmerman. I know this is something that everybody hopefully is familiar with. We just talked about it briefly. Zimmerman racially profiled Trayvon Martin, who was only a child at the time, in Sanford, Florida. Trayvon defended himself, and then he was murdered. So Zimmerman also, like Drake, originally faced no charges until the community began rallying around the issues. Particularly, I can remember the new Black Panther Party jumping in.
Dream Defenders, that's where they started.
Dream
That's how
Defenders
Dream
did begin.
That's
They
how
did
they started.
Tallahassee, right? They did that
Yeah,
Tallahassee.
They occupied in town.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that was again community having to step up for this supposed justice system to do its thing. But what do these two cases have in common? Well, they both lived in Florida. They were both under the laws of the state of Florida. And both George Zimmerman, when he was eventually charged, and Marissa Alexander were both prosecuted by former state attorney Angela Corey. And when I say the word former, that is with so much joy. She needs to stay far away from everybody. She was terrible. But one prosecutor, one size fits all. So at the same time that Angela Corey is aggressively pursuing aggravated assault charges on the 1020 life against Marissa Alexander for defending herself, even though she had not killed or maimed anyone, her intent was get out of my house and leave me and my children be. She was facing potentially 20 years, which Angela Corey then went and appealed to the judges and said, actually, it should be 60 years because she has 3 counts of aggravated assault. So I don't know, I can't remember why it was 3, but it was. So it's just like, so she was like 20, 20, 20, that's 60. So we're now looking from 20 years, which is already aggressive and violent, at 60. Meanwhile, George Zimmerman is getting, the white glove treatment and is held as this hero by Sanford Police Department. A warning shot carries a harsher sentence than actual murder. Zimmerman was sought after far less aggressively. In fact, legal scholars argue that Angela Corey failed to charge him properly, and it's argued that she probably did that on purpose because she was less likely to get a conviction, whereas she intentionally overcharged Marissa Alexander. Her handling of Zimmerman's case was so scrutinized by legal scholars, and I hate using this term, but on both sides. So like legal scholars were just like, what is she doing? Like, this isn't the strategy I'd use. Is she trying to get a conviction? All signs are kind of pointing to no. That wasn't the case with Marissa Alexander, where she did everything she could to secure this conviction. Now, when I look at these two and I look at public safety as a general conversation, I feel for me, obviously I wouldn't be someone that'd be targeted by George Zimmerman, but I feel for the people I love in the community, I would feel much safer with Marissa Alexander around them than I would with George Zimmerman. But yet she was treated as though a violent threat. George Zimmerman roams free today despite murdering a child. That's a true sentence, and the state of Florida has that legacy.
And I love that she just, not that this adds to the ideology, but just a child. And I'm so glad that she lifted that. Like, a child, he murdered a child, and a woman defending her children was given so much more time. So that's just,
it goes back to the crime of being Black and defending Black children, because that was true in all cases. Even the damn 911 operator told Zimmerman to back off. Thanks to aggressive community pressure and ongoing participatory defense, Marissa Alexander, although she still was convicted, was able to get her sentence reduced to 3 years. Now, originally her intent was to get the whole thing withdrawn.
Only makes sense.
Yeah, which is what she should have been. What should have been.
Should have been, yeah.
But when she started to think about those kids and her sister and all these people, and she was looking at 60 or 3, she took the plea deal for the 3. I don't blame her. I don't blame her. And
we've been in this situation.
We've been in. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So 3 years, I mean, in a perfect world, it would have been no conviction, and she wouldn't have had any legal consequences, and she would have actually been paid reparations for the time that was stolen from her, because that was stolen time.
And she still deserves that.
And
that's a campaign we could talk about, but that's another day. Reparations for folks who've been falsely charged.
Yes, yes, it should be default, and it's disgusting when you get exonerated that you don't. And then reparations in general from the past. We can't repair if we don't do the repair work. But participatory defense does not always mean we get the outcome we dream of. Sometimes it's the dropping of some charges and not others. And sometimes, and we have to be honest, sometimes you do participatory defense and the person gets a full conviction. You do not always win, but you know when else you don't always win? When you don't try. So we have to take those on. I was questioning myself the other day. Did Angela Corey fail as a state attorney, or is it just the way the system is? And then I was looking at it from a legal perspective, and I have no defense for Angela Corey. I hate her, but she did everything right by the law. And that to me makes me more angry, not less angry.
The law allowed for it.
The law allowed for it, and the law said this is what you should be doing. Even with the initial non-arrest of George Zimmerman was justified under the law. I don't agree with the interpretation of it, but the way it was interpreted. So things like this propel me deeper and deeper into abolition work. A little bit of like, I think for most of us, I know for myself, when I started getting this, I still had some small sliver of hope for the USA or the system, or like, oh, it just needs at first it was just a little bit more that needed. And I was like, oh, it just needs a lot more. And I was like, oh, just a little. And then I'm just like, no, the whole thing is trash.
We can talk about it later.
Okay. One thing I think that's important and I think, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, the second book, Beyond Survival, talks a lot about women and non-men who are in positions to defend themselves, whether it's as far as what Marissa Alexander or Santoya Brown had to do, or just like calling out the harassers in chapter 2. Women who defend themselves are far less likely to get the nuances of things like stand your ground. That's especially true for Black and or trans or queer women. Especially true in those cases.
I can speak to my case.
You want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Go
ahead, Ordeja.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up Survived and Punished out of New York. I guess they have a few chapters, but I was actually able to work briefly with them when I was there. And I think they maybe talks about in the Beyond Survivor book, I think they have an essay in there. And they are not strictly participatory defense, but they focus on criminalized survivors. So people, women and non-cis men who, exactly like Marissa Alexander, have been the full weight of the criminal injustice system put against them for literally trying to survive, to live, to defend themselves. And so yeah, I just wanted to plug Survived and Punished. They do a lot of trying to free people in prison, where they're trying to get the governor to reduce sentences and let people out. So that's the mechanism that they go through. But they particularly focus on women and non-men because it's such it goes all the way back to literally slave times, when like Black women weren't able to defend themselves against white masters who could do literally whatever with them. And there's like notable cases in those times, like the 1800s, of like Black women being put in prison or lynched or killed for pushing off advances from white masters. So definitely is like a real problem. I really appreciate y'all for paralleling these two and bringing in, just having this analysis. It's really important.
Thank you for that, Ordeja. Would you mind throwing that resource in the chat too?
Yeah, I'll drop their website.
Something I just want to add to this discussion, I'm not sure if it's absolutely necessary, and I'm going to ask for privacy in this, and what's shared here isn't shared other places. We can stop the recording or pause it.
Yeah, we're gonna pause the recording for this part because it's personal.
Yeah, but
it's you did the share. The recording is in the more, I think. Sorry, y'all.
Sorry, y'all.
I just paused. This work is personal, right? It goes right into what we're dealing with in real life. One size fits all, right? So let's talk about RW, who punches a man in the face and is charged with battery. And then EG, who punches a man in the face and is charged with battery. They're the same, right?
Yeah.
Right?
One would think.
There's nothing different here. That's how the criminal justice system would look at it. Just like this. Okay. And even with the initials, like you're lucky if you get that much of your name on the damn file. Is it ever okay to punch someone in the face? That seems like a silly question. But is there ever a time where it's moral or ethical or legal to punch someone in the face?
If I'm getting attacked, yes.
Boom. Kieran says if she's being attacked, she punched someone in the face and she will not feel any moral or ethical guilt about it. Now, Kieran, what do you think the legal system would think if you did it? That's all they know. You punch someone in the face.
I would probably get blamed if that's the only information that they
That's
had.
what they have. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
And even if they have other information, they might not see it that way still.
The chances are stacked, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say battery has a minimum mandatory of 1 year. It doesn't, but let's just say it does to make it simple. So let's assume both RW and EG did in fact punch someone in the face. They're not denying it. Nobody's denying it. That's agreed upon. In law, that's called a stipulation. That means all sides agree. Jury's not trying to decide if that happened because we agree that that happened. If a mandatory minimum was imposed based on these logics, RW and EG are both going to get 1 year in jail because they punched someone in the face.
At the very least.
At the very least, because that's a mandatory minimum, right? But what if EG punched someone in the face because he was running late at the grocery store? A man was walking too slow in front of him, so EG tapped him on the shoulder. When he turned around, he yelled, "Hurry the fuck up," and punched the man, causing an injury. The scuffle ends with EG being charged with battering. That happens. People like really flip out in the world today. Is that legal? I mean, not legal. I don't want to use legal here. Is that ethical or moral to have done that?
Liliana answers.
Liliana says no.
No.
Right. Just because you're running late and somebody's walking slow, you can't punch. Like I would not.
Yeah.
Like my best friends could do it. I'd be like, "Girl, you were in the wrong. Like, why did you do that?"
Yes.
But I'd still defend y'all. But what if RW punched someone in the face because a man was wielding a knife at him and said verbally, "I'm going to cut you." Afraid for his safety, RW makes one punch at him and then leaves the area as the threat is now neutralized. But then he is charged with battery. Was that punch ethical or moral?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Liliana says yes.
Angel responded.
Angel.
Do you want to add to that, Angel?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's a clear case of self-defense if someone's got an instrument of violence, you know. So that sounded so formal. If someone's got a knife that's gonna like fuck you up, you gotta defend yourself.
Yes, and this is a real situation. Driving under the influence is one that we have to talk about because it is actually one of the highest causes of arrest in Florida, and we also have one of the highest recidivism rates for it. Go figure. Driving under the influence is absolutely dangerous. It's a reckless decision that has been known to cause death and severe injury to others. No sensible person could argue that driving under the influence is not a serious public safety risk. And I say this as someone who has been charged with the offense. Not proud of it, but I did the thing and the system held me accountable for it. But driving under the influence is not something that can be looked at as one size fits all. And I learned that during my, I guess, probation, when I was forced to go to all these really expensive classes. What if AL and BE each receive a DUI for consuming alcohol and then driving with an 0.08 blood alcohol content? Under the statutes of the state, they'll face the same or very similar penalties.
What's the blood alcohol limit? Is it 0.007?
08 is when you are under the influence. But
Okay.
you can actually be arrested for less. If anyone wants to have
Really?
a conversation about it, I can tell you everything.
Wow.
But yeah, so
yes,
just be very
please.
careful if you are consuming alcohol and driving. But what if AL has alcohol use disorder, which we would know that's the medical term for alcoholism, and has demonstrated a serious problem with handling alcohol in their life? But BE normally doesn't even drink, went out, got a little carried away, and just made a bad choice that night. The system is going to use the same programs, the same tools. I had to see a therapist, forced by the state of Florida, to see a therapist about the issues. I paid her $70 in cash for 6 sessions, 30-minute sessions. She didn't even tell me her name. I wasn't even worth like an introduction. And honestly, if I had alcohol use disorder, which I don't, but if I did, 6 sessions, oh, I'm cured. Like I walked out of there, and the audacity on my final session, which was 10 minutes, even though I still had to pay the full 70, imagine that. She hands me a paperwork, my discharge papers, and says, "Oh, if you have any problems, you have up to 30 days to contact me." Okay, so you're treating me as though I have alcohol use disorder because that's apparently the status quo here.
Mm-hmm.
When reality, what happened was I went out, the drinks were buy one, get one free. I went overboard, got talking, wasn't thinking, because normally I stop at 2 and I'm fine. And I had 4. And I just made a bad choice and did a California stop and roll, and that was it. So I'm not justifying driving under the end. It's dangerous. And I'm glad my outcome was that and not running into someone. I'm thankful for that every single day. But there were elements to this process that made me even angrier about the system. And just like I was telling Sadie, even though I had been in restorative justice and criminal punishment work for years, I was so ashamed. I didn't even tell Sadie for weeks. And I think it was longer for Kieran.
For me, yeah.
And it was just like, I don't know what, like, I was like, oh, they're gonna, why would I think that? These are the last people that would think that, but that's how deep criminal charge stigma is to us. Now, in my case, I was able to afford a private attorney. Now, if this had happened a year before, I wouldn't have been able to. I just got lucky. I had gotten this job in time. I spent all this money on bail. I spent $500 on bail, which I didn't get any of that back because I went to court case probation fees. I had to go on probation, see this therapist. I had to put, this was actually, I'm laughing about it now, but I had to put that thing on your car where you blow into it. And as I was thinking about that, that was a private for-profit company that services there. Their name is Guardian something. Terrible customer service, but what am I going to do, right? To the manager? Like, and as it was going on, the DUI class, the driving class, was a couple $100. The license and registration fees that I had to pay, the fines, the Guardian breathalyzer thing, the therapist. There was a lot of people making money off of this. So then I started to get the thinking. I was like, this is why this is one of the most common arrests. And I started to think, like, what would an abolition response be? It wouldn't be, oh, okay, it's okay to drive drunk. That's not okay.
Yeah.
It would be, what if we had mass transit? What if bartenders had to limit you on open alcohol to a certain amount? What if we had alternatives to, hey, you got caught driving, like, let's pull you off, let's take you somewhere, impound your car could be your punishment or something, punishment. But it's just like the whole thing and spending that time in the jail. I literally want to tell y'all, on TV, they tell you get one phone call. That's if you don't piss them off. Because I had the audacity to ask for my phone call. I was having trouble dialing out, and one of the inmates tried to help me. He's like, oh, I don't know, go see the guy. I went to, some guy was very polite, and I was like, excuse me, sir, and all that stuff. He's like, don't you see I'm fucking talking? He got up in my face. He's like, you're almost out of here. You can go into the holding cell, which is jail version of solitary. He's like, he's like, I'll slam you to the ground. And I got docile. I was like, okay, because what? In that moment, I realized there was nothing I could do. I had no power. I couldn't complain until after I was out of there. They weren't going to care once I got out. The other inmates were not going to come up to my defense, which I can't blame them.
Yeah.
So in this situation, I was BE. Those aren't my initials, but that's I had other people in that class that were like me. They just went out one night and made a very bad choice, but they were handed the same tools as everybody else. And that doesn't make any sense. But it does when you think about how the system works. The system does work. So when I was thinking about Angela Corey, is she a failure of a state attorney? No, she's not, because she's doing what she's supposed to do. Maintain white supremacy by ensuring severe racial inequities occur at all levels. Percentage of Black arrests versus white in Tampa alone is extreme. It's 25% of the population in Tampa is Black, but like I think it's like 20 or 54% of the arrests are Black.
That's it.
That's asinine. Over policing of Black and Indigenous neighborhoods specifically. We see Robles Park. We were at the event. I don't think you weren't at this one. The last one we were at, police showed up. They didn't come and interact with us, but they were there watching. And that's because it was, you were at that one? Okay. Yeah. That was the, and it was put on by Black organizers for the Black community.
Shout out Erdasia.
Shout out Erdasia. Getting the police coming out and feeling all threatened about mutual aid. Percent of representation in prisons and jails. The percentage, when we look at the Black population in the United States, it's about 13%, but they make up about half of the prison population. That is an extreme overrepresentation, and that is purposeful. The war on drugs, which has residually also affected all queer and trans people, both white and non-white, because of our usage of drugs. And it's just like, this is why it baffles me, like people who don't understand intersectionality, like other white queer people. It's like, you do know that these same systems residually, you may not have been the target, but hello, they found a way to make it work to hurt you too. It's nonsense. Immigration enforcement maintains white supremacy. It makes sure that only certain immigrants are welcome and only immigrants that are willing to assimilate as much as possible into United States culture, which whatever that is, hamburgers or something, an Old Navy, I don't know. But
We saw that at the turn of the century with indigenous communities too.
big time.
Mhm.
The forcing of them going to certain schools, foster care systems need to be challenged.
Mhm.
The system works very well. Maintaining cis heteropatriarchy by ensuring women, non-binary folks, trans and or queer individuals are not protected. Gendered violence in the jails, prisons, and policing.
Yep.
The gay and trans panic attack, which was born in Florida in 1954, is still legal in Florida today. If I get beaten to death by a man and he can convince a judge that I flirted with him and that made him scared, he could get off scot-free.
Several other states too.
Several states, it's about 40 something now.
Yeah.
Some of them are starting to repel it. Misreporting of hate violence. So there's a lot of cases where trans people, gay, queer people are targeted for hate violence and it's not reported. So it doesn't show up and that makes it makes it look less of a problem. However, I will say sexual orientation, I was looking at the numbers. In 2019, we made up 17% of all hate crime violence and we are less than 5% of this country's population. And then we talk about laws disfavor women survivors and they punish non-men who defend themselves, as well as the sexual battery kit backlog. So those are some examples of maintaining that. Maintaining class inequity. The cost of competent legal defense is out of most of our ranges. Bail system itself, inadequate public defenders, the affluenza defense, fines and court fees, probation and parole costs, and gain for private stakeholders, beneficiaries of prison labor, the breathalyzer manufacturer, bail bondsmen, core civic, civil forfeiture, and all those things. That is the system working. So when people say we need to fix the system, it kind of drives me up the wall because it's just like every time we fix it, we find a new way to maintain these objectives. So if we fix an inequity in one way, they just transform it in another way, which is what I think Michelle Alexander's new Jim Crow highlights the most.
And Liliana, did you want to add to that? You said you can give a seminar about it.
Yeah, we'd like to.
I mean, it was mostly a joke, but yeah, just like in regards to immigration, that's definitely something that happens a lot with Puerto Rican people. Like there's a big group that prides themselves in how quickly they assimilate or how well they speak English, or yeah. So yeah, just really a joke, but yeah, it happens.
Yeah, I always talk about it too because of my lineage is Sicilian, and we used to be radical mutual aid type people. And we came here and now we're like, oh, we speak English and so what? Like, so it's awful. Like we get a piece of the pie of being the privileged class and sell everybody else out. And now, we have that with cisgender gays, particularly white cisgender gays, but occasionally, there's a few of color that slip in there too, that are taking advantage of now like the legal rights of marriage as though that means queer liberation has happened. And it's like, that's literally just assimilation. It's complicated, but so what time is it? How are we on time?
It is 1:23.
So we're almost at the end. So I just wanted to make some space for a particular case that's happening in Tampa, Florida. I want to apologize up front that I don't know the appropriate way to say Corey's last name. I've heard it said a few different ways.
Pujols.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
The J is silent.
Yeah, I wasn't sure because I've heard two different ways. I have tried to reach out to Corey and his family, and so far they have not accepted any support, which is fine. We're here if they need it. But on May the 4th of 2021, Corey was working as a shift manager at Dunkin' Donuts in Hillsborough County. A elderly white man, 77 years of age, was being unruly in the drive-thru over God knows what and was asked to leave the space. Pretty simple. You're being an asshole to workers, leave. Instead of leaving, he pulls into a parking spot of this Dunkin' Donuts, then decides to walk in to the Dunkin' Donuts and started a verbal altercation with Corey. Naturally, Corey was defending himself back, saying like, you need to leave, you need to get out. Just simple, just leave the Dunkin' Donuts. You're not entitled to Dunkin' Donuts. It's a private business. It's funny how much they believe in private businesses until it's them.
Mhm.
So this 77-year-old man decided to use a racial slur at Corey. So Corey's like, come again? Like, just making sure you heard right. And the man said it again. So Corey punched him in the face. To me, that qualifies as self-defense, because I say this, when I hear an oppressive slur at me, I don't know if the next thing that's coming is physical violence. I'm sure a lot of you have. I know when I worked for Publix, I worked for them for 9 years. I was standing behind the counter and I had to tell someone I couldn't cash their check because it was above the limit. We only cashed up to 75 and it was like 100. And instead of just saying, okay, or even just being pissed about it, he's like, fucking faggot. And I swear, like, the feeling inside of me was just like, what's going to happen next? So we were this close. Now he decided to walk out. But I did not know if the next thing that was going to happen was going to be a physical strike. And I think about people like Matthew Shepard, and I think about a lot of the Black trans women that have been killed. The faggot was the last word they heard. So racial slurs, because a lot of times when we hear these things, they're like, oh, well, they're just words. They're just words. It's not like someone called you a jerk or something.
Yeah.
These are words that have a historical meaning. And when I hear the word, even just the fact that I just said it now, I'm feeling like such a sense of malaise and danger. So I think like it is violence. Thank you for naming that as violence. And it's taken a long time for me to accept that what happened to me at work was violence. Because I was, at the time, I was definitely more assimilationist in my mindset and like, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, be nice to the straights and they'll be nice to you. Wrong. You know, I mean, I've been verbally assaulted so many times at my job. Now, I never used any physical force, but I remember having a conversation with someone. I was so angry about it and I wanted to, a different job I had, someone called me that as well, and it was in a construction staffing firm and we had like shovels. I wanted to pick up the shovel and slam it over his face. Instead, I didn't, of course. But it's like and it's not just a want. It's not like the scenario earlier, that person walking so slow and the guy punches him and it's like, yeah, maybe, you know, you want to punch someone because they're walking so slow. That's not okay. But in this case, I'm in my job being called something. I'm in a minority group. I was the only person there that this word applied to.
Something hateful.
Something hateful, something that has a history. I can understand why somebody would say, I need to defend myself, especially because this person walked in and created this altercation. It wasn't as though it was a mutual altercation, and it still wouldn't have been okay, just to be clear. So anyway, to go on to that, this 77-year-old man gets punched, and police come, they do the report, and they arrest Corey for battery on an elder.
Yeah,
he's
'cause
arrested.
he later died. Yeah.
Eventually, yeah. So he's arrested on May 4th, taken to the jail, booked, charged, gets out on bond. Probably got fired from Dunkin' Donuts, I'm sure. A few days later, I think on the 6th or the 7th, this elderly man dies in a Hillsborough County hospital. So the state attorney, or the judges rather, issue a warrant for Corey's arrest.
Was it apparent, sorry to interject, but was it apparent that it was associated with that blood trauma?
From what they're claiming, yeah. They're saying that he got
fell or
hit
something.
and hit his head on the ground. So they're claiming that's why. So, you know, who knows what the truth is. But on the police report does indicate the racial slur was used. It actually spells it out. I'm sure the cop had a great joy writing it. You know, and I honestly said, and I said this kind of as a joke, but it wasn't a joke. I was like, the police were happy that this man was just doing their job for him. So of course they're going to arrest Corey.
Yep.
You know, and that goes back to the lack of nuance, right? And then, you know, it's an emotionally charged because as a society, we're reacting to the fact that someone died, and that means we should automatically, like, the other person has to be punished. But that wasn't the case when Trayvon Martin died. That wasn't the case when Marquise McLaughlin died. We didn't have that reaction. When I say we, I mean society as a whole, which largely means white society. After this man falls to the ground, he goes to the hospital. A few days later, he dies. The state of Florida brings out elevated charges of aggravated manslaughter, I think is the charge. I can't remember the charge, but he's now going from battery on an elder to manslaughter. Gets arrested, has to pay another round of bail, goes through the system, and now it's getting highlighted, it's getting media attention, largely negative, of course, and mainstream media. And Corey is facing a potential of 30 years incarcerated in the state of Florida Department of Corrections for self-defense.
Charging with manslaughter.
It was manslaughter? Okay.
Mhm.
It's ridiculous. What are your, and I want to ask folks, what are your thoughts on the charges and the shift in charges? And there's no judgment here, just whatever you think, just a community combo.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. So, and I don't know what the legal, but what is manslaughter? Like, does anyone know what like the legal definition? Does it imply
It's less culpable than murder, and that's like the only thing I know about it. Like it's lower than murder, but I don't know if there's like how they have degrees in murder or like intentional or accidental. That's the breadth of my knowledge.
okay? Yeah, definition. When someone is killed, but it's not premeditated, basically. Nevertheless, it's still, bullshit, given the context of white supremacy and the great examples you brought up, D'Angelo, of Trayvon and Marquise McLaughlin. Yeah.
Erdeja?
Yeah, I just want to say that it almost like manslaughter is the state's way of being nuanced, which is like fucking hilarious. Because they're like, oh no, like look, we recognize that like all murder isn't intentional, and like sometimes like things happen that you didn't necessarily like intend for, and yeah, it's like obviously not enough. Still a very much one size fit all when you get to the end of it. And I, as you, like you were saying about our strong reaction to it being because it was a murder. I think like that is the function manslaughter serves. It's like we still want to have a strong reaction because it's a murder, and we recognize that there is some intent. But again, like the outcome is still very much the same.
Liliana?
Yeah, it's bullshit because even a charge of manslaughter, I feel like if you exceeded force, you feel me? Like if you did something to like try to take that person's life, but he clearly wasn't. He was just trying to punch him in the mouth, most likely, for what he said. So it's like, how do you go from like his action in regards to like a racial slur is justified because he punched the dude in the face, but like at what point is it still his fault that the dude is old, had no balance, like cracked the back of his head, like it's so fucked up.
But they say racism takes off your balance a little bit. Angel, did you have something?
Yeah, a bad joke that's a quote from a Smith song is he was old and he would have died anyways. But sorry. But what the state is failing to take into account is that Corey was acting in self-defense, and that language, like Liliana mentioned, is violence, and that language always that, let's call it linguistic violence or verbal violence or psychological violence, always accompanies physical violence, right? So I think in many ways, Corey is justified in defending himself from that violence, ultimately. And if the state, and so the state fails to take that into consideration, because similar yet different to Marissa Alexander, right? Black bodies defending themselves from that violence has always been criminalized, right? That's what's that's like the MO of the US, right? So yeah.
Exactly. And I say this, I do not take this lightly. For those who don't know, in 2017, I lost my sister-in-law to a homicide. And that was a very complicated space to be in as an abolitionist. I was like, not feeling very much like an abolitionist right now. But it took some time for me to recognize that it was a lot bigger than our single family situation. In that court case, I learned a lot about homicide, and was it first degree, second degree, and there was actually an attempt to turn that into a manslaughter to protect, the defendant in that case by the defense attorney, which is their job. So it's interesting how we can apply these words wherever it feels appropriate. I feel here, Erdasia says, and white people always have the right to defend themselves. And especially so, Erdasia, what's interesting, for lack of a better word, is how my fellow white people talk about so much about defending ourselves, and we don't even need this or that because we've got the Second Amendment. It's all fun and games until it's a non-white person defending themselves against one of us.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah.
So I took some time to review the article and having the view of being a restorative and transformative justice practitioner and also an abolitionist and also being a non-binary trans woman. I think what struck me was the solidarity of the community at large and how they were able to galvanize and leverage support using mutual aid as a vehicle, and even the GoFundMe's defending Corey, stating his character and, using their community power to leverage that was just really wholesome to read. And I believe that restorative and even transformative justice can have intersections here. Forgiveness for reconciliation is required for anybody. And I think that there needs to be better systems in place to protect both people, because as a manager, I've had people who tried to come out of pocket and I've had to defend employees and even in front of guests. And I'm like, absolutely not. If you do not want to have a civil discourse, that's fine. Take it outside, take it somewhere else, but not here. And Black people and, Indigenous people of color, we have to deal with this vitriol and hate every day, moment and second of our lives. So I understand the automatic reaction that was elicited from being called a derogatory slur over and over again. That's harrowing, especially at work when, work is sometimes the only place where you can really engage with people without isolating yourself. So it's just I'm trying to radically envision what are different ways that, Corey and the people can heal from this, because it's not fair to have a punitive response towards self-defense.
Thank you so much, Kit. And we wanted to get consent to extend to 145. Good discussion.
Yes.
Any objection? And I think what you said too, Kit, the system's not going to have this nuance because it doesn't want it. I feel like the state of Florida knows very well that this was a case of defense. I'm really going to keep trying to engage the family without being pushy, because they have every reason to have distrust. I know that there was a fundraiser that was on Facebook that's been taken down. I don't know if that was by Facebook or by the family. I'm going to try to figure that out. But I think to what you said, Kit, there has to be a transformative response, and we know there is transformative responses to this. For the white family, I'm sorry you lost someone, but let's start having an education with your rest of your white family about not being overt racist, and start working on the covert racism within our families. I that's all there is to it. It's cut, it's dry. It maybe not be the prettiest statement. It's definitely got me a lot of hate on Instagram, but I stand behind Corey 100%. And I'm not saying that I don't take the loss of life lightly. I don't take it lightly, but he was defending himself in the same way. If I ever was in that situation where I didn't know what was next after the slur, I hope my community would defend me. And while my outcome may be a little better than what may possibly happen to Corey, it probably still wouldn't be ideal in that situation either, because these systems are designed to make us feel afraid for our lives every single day. So I think one thing that I really encourage people to do is start sharing Corey's story, start sharing your truth about Corey's story. And when someone comes in there, regardless of who they are, if there's someone that's even an acquaintance to you, a coworker, someone who you can discuss with, instead of doing that default, block them and whatever, if you have the space anyway, try to engage them and say, hey, this is how I feel, and we have to have this uncomfortable and ugly conversation. I think that about a lot of things. It has to start with, we have to get together and say, what's the nuance to this case? Now, obviously, if it's going to be detrimental to your health, you know, and it's a person that's problematic and privileged and they're not a relationship you necessarily want to keep, then do what you got to do. But if it's like, hey, we've been friends forever and we're not seeing eye to eye on this one issue, but you're usually right about other stuff, like, let's figure out what's blocking you. And I think it's the emotional reaction to death. I think it is.
Chat.
You're onto something. Oh, I'm sorry. Kit said something first. I wonder if education is an accessible vehicle to allow people to become equipped with TJ mechanisms. You're onto something what I've been considering since my vigilante justice question. I agree. We have to have more education. Erdeja's mutual aid events to me are mind-blowing because people, these are community members that don't do any, they didn't read any Kimberly Crenshaw. They haven't read the latest, you know, Adrienne Marie Brown book, which I recommend all of Adrienne's work. These are just people living their lives every day. Some of them working 2-3 jobs, raising children, and they're coming here and they're learning things that they have never been introduced to before. And I try to think when I was introduced to these subjects, and when I first met Sadie, and when I first met Kieran, I didn't know any of this stuff. So does anyone else want to throw in anything on the Corey case or something similar that's happened to them or their family, or ideas you may have to bring this conversation into, I don't want to say mainstream because we'll probably won't get it into the mainstream, but into the organizing consciousness, because no one's really talking about it. I see Liliana.
Hi, all I wanted to offer was just yeah, I like work on graphic design and like advertising and web stuff. So however I can help RJC when it comes to taking that into the mainstream, I'm here.
Thank you. And Angel.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, you know, bringing this back to you know, or at least connecting this with our discussion, your discussion earlier about participatory defense and how can we, you know, is it too early to start? I mean, I guess it's never too early, but I guess we probably need more details about how this case is going to play out before we can think about how to kind of mobilize to try to practice participatory defense on Corey's behalf.
I've already, you know, for me, it started immediately, but you know, of course, the big thing is connecting with the family and getting their consent, which we have not gotten yet. Now, I believe there are certain things that, yes, we need consent in the family before we move forward, like as far as the actual case. Conversations about the case, though, because it is about a larger thing. Individual cases are never about the individuals involved, just about them, rather. It's big, the macro of it. I think we need to have these conversations. I would love it if the family would welcome us, and as soon as they do, we're in. We're in till the end, win or lose. But I will say the research I've done so far, state of Florida is one of several states that recognizes, and I believe this is through the Supreme Court. I don't know if it was the Supreme Court of the United States or the state of Florida. I still have more reading to do. Recognizes fighting words as justification for physical self-defense. Fighting words is kind of broadly defined as words that by their very utterance would cause emotional or physical distress. So even fighting words, my understanding is, and this is old conventional wisdom that isn't exactly correct, but you know how like they say limitations to free speech, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's not really a court case or anything, it's conventional wisdom. Like I can't sit here and just yell fire and everyone panic and then I just laugh about it. That would be a problem. So fighting words is kind of a similar concept where like, you don't know what's gonna happen next. And in this case, I think one idea I have is, and this could be painful and triggering to do, but it may be necessary, is for people who have been called, whether that slur or the slur I brought up earlier that I've been called, and having videos that's talking about how it made us feel and why it triggered our fight or flight response. See, I'm flight by nature. So for me, if there's a threat, whether it's physical or if it's verbal or whatever, my nature is flight. I will just try to get out of the situation. That's not everybody's nature. And that is okay. And honestly, I wish I was a little bit more fight. I will only fight if I have no alternative. But not everybody is going to retreat. And the same state that did not give a damn about what Michael Drake did or what George Zimmerman did or what Michael Dunn did until community action came about, use things like they don't have a duty to retreat. They don't have a duty to retreat. But what kills me is in the Zimmerman case, the Dunn case, and the Drake case, I don't see how you can not have a duty to retreat when what you're retreating from is what you started.
Mhm.
How do you not have a duty to retreat? You do
Right.
have a duty to retreat because
Right.
you had a duty to not start the shit.
Right.
Mhm.
Versus Marissa Alexander, who suddenly had a duty to retreat. Suddenly, Corey had a duty to retreat.
Mhm.
So we have a minute left. I want to make sure we're making space for everyone. You know, you can always hit us up too if you come up with ideas or thoughts. But the biggest ask I have, if you're part of any community organizations, the duty to not start, yeah, please like make a t-shirt. Like, please go back to your communities, whether it's in organizing spaces or it's just your friends and families. And for those of us that have maybe more conservative family members, making them hear, like, no, I stand with Corey. I stand with Corey 100%. And if I have to lose every friend I have, besides you all, then I'll lose if I have to lose my family, if I can't go back for Christmas, that's okay. Because Corey's not going to be able to either if we don't fight.
Exactly. So I think this is a good opportunity to go ahead and close this out. Did anybody else have something to add? No? Okay. It is so wonderful seeing everyone's beautiful faces. Thank you all for attending today. We have a few racial justice organizations on the screen that you can reference for either campaigns that they're working on or just education around better criminal justice culture, like D'Angelo mentioned earlier. You can find us on social media. We do have a TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, which is where we do most of our stuff, in our website, is restorativejusticecoalition.com. We recently created a Patreon for our membership models. Shout out to Angel, who I know is a member and recently got some RJC swag. So thank you all so much. And I'm sure, it's your mug. I love it. We got to pin this.
Oh, we do have to put that. That's great.
Look at this mug. Okay. Love, love, love it.
Thank you all so much for
Uh,
seeing all the awesome, amazing work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angel. And we appreciate every single one of you. Ardesia, Kit, Liliana, Angel, Kieran, D'Angelo. I don't think I skipped anyone. I think I got, yeah. But,
Sadie.
Yeah, and you, and
And
Sadie
self.
Day, and Raina. I also want to say real quick, if any of you are part of organizations and you want one of us to come do this presentation or have this discussion with them, we are totally cool with people who may not agree, as long as they don't say anything completely out of pocket. But we can have conversations with, that are tense. We can do that. As long as we know we're going into it, and it might be tense.
Yes. And then, of course, hyping up Kit, who's been an amazing transformative justice facilitator. So please reach out to her for any services that you may need as well. But we thank you all so much. And if you need anything, you can reach us on any of the social media networks we just named. But enjoy your Sunday, and we'll be in touch with you for our next workshop.
ooh. Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, y'all.
Take care.
Thank you.
That